Do you know I'm reading a horror story in Braille?
Is it a bumpy road?
No, but something bad's coming. I can just feel it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Brand Coverage. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson. And Pat, our Super Bowl matchup is set.
Not the music again.
This is just how I feel about it. Feels like our death march toward an irritating Super Bowl. Our greatest fears have come to fruition. It is Chiefs. It is Eagles in Super Bowl, 59? Super Bowl licks, as the cool kids are calling it, as Gronk is calling it. Fuck. I mean, goddamn it, right? I don't. The Eagles. It's funny. I really don't have as much against the Eagles as a lot of people seem to, and I get it. Like, much rather would have had the Commanders in a vacuum. Much rather would have had a lot of teams in the NFC in. But as far as like this idea that it's difficult who to root for in this Super Bowl, like some are suggesting, I think you're all out of your fucking minds. And this is as a Patriots fan who was victimized by Nick Foles and the Eagles only a mere 7-8 years ago. And I'm just like, this is not a tough choice. So I don't fully understand that. But folks, we will get into that right now, basically. But I do want to get this off the top. This is pretty exciting. I joined a playoff pool. I think, are you in this playoff bracket pool that we that our buddy Steve created? I don't remember if you were.
I think so. I think I might have forgotten to fill out my bracket.
if
I
so,
paid it.
Well, that's good. See, here's the thing. I joined it, and I in my head I assumed it was for money, but I wasn't positive. But I didn't pay him either until recently, and then he hit me up, and now I find out it's for money. It's for like $500, and I have a chance to win because I was, believe it or not, the only one in a pool of 25 people to pick the Eagles to win the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Which means this will just be all the more devastating if and when Kansas City pulls off the three-peat, because now I know there's $500 on the line that I would have missed out on potentially.
Oh, I actually did all right. I'm fifth right now. I can't get any more points, obviously. Both my Super Bowl teams are up, but that's a respectable showing.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. So, yeah, it's down to me or obviously the guy who is the highest up right now with the Chiefs winning it all.
Fucking A-hand, man.
I know. Our boy is a legend. We've played fantasy. It's like our buddy's uncle who's just kind of been this enigma for our entire life, and he's up there again. But yeah, I got a chance to win $500, so that's pretty cool. But I also may just be disappointed. So Pat, let's get into our championship breakdown, and then we'll get into a little bit of Super Bowl prediction. I guess let's start with the headline, the game, Chiefs-Bills. Chiefs 32, Bills 29. Josh Allen fails to get it done once again, even though it wasn't really a whole lot on him, but it nonetheless, he finds himself on the losing side of things again. The press conference of him was just kind of heartbreaking. It seems like he, much like the rest of us, just don't really know what else he has to do to get by this just monstrous Chiefs dynasty at this point. What were your main takeaways from this game, Pat, and how are we feeling about the Chiefs coming away again?
You know, I feel like to describe how I feel is just kind of a deep sigh, because, like you said, there wasn't a whole lot. You could point to the Commanders got their doors blown off, but you can, point to turnovers for the Commanders. The Bills, there's not really a glaring issue that you could bring up that says, this cost them the game. They played a good game, and they just got outplayed by the better team. You really hate to say it. That's the thing. The thing that put it in perspective for me with the Chiefs was seeing that turnover was the first since week 11. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That Justin Herbert does that 8 times in a week, let alone going 8 games without a turnover. And
poor Justin Herbert, who had 3 picks all year.
Literally
just
one bad game and he's getting slandered
by this.
Hell
but
yeah.
Fair enough.
Hell yeah. We love slander. But that just is a sign of a good, disciplined football team. And, it's more so, it's boring the fact that we saw this matchup, 2 years ago? Was this same exact matchup? That's a bit underwhelming, but also from the fact, that, we want to see new teams, new teams win, but at the end of the day, you still have to respect greatness, and, The biggest thing you could say about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes is that they just know how to get it done. Like they are built for the moment, and that's why they are where they are again. And that's why in 2 weeks we could very well be sulking over a three-peat.
God. Yeah, and that's where it's frustrating, and it is so similar to, I feel, the Patriots dynasty in its prime is just, you knew they weren't going to beat themselves, and that's where the Chiefs are at this point. And to the Chiefs' credit, like, Patrick Mahomes' numbers this year were not overwhelmingly good. They stayed pretty mediocre most of the season, but as you mentioned with the turnovers, that was something I didn't realize either, because Mahomes was chucking quite a few picks at the start of the year, and then you go
I know.
Once I heard that, as a fantasy owner, you definitely know. Once I heard that stat about them not turning it over in the last 8 weeks, I went to look at his numbers, and it was like, again, the yards and the touchdowns kind of stayed the same, pretty mediocre, pretty reflective of the fact that A, they don't have Tyreek Hill anymore, B, Mahomes himself destroyed Rashee Rice's ACL halfway through the year, but the interceptions went away. And so it was just a reflection of, they are going to play clean football. You are going to have to play perfect and try to force them into an uncharacteristic mistake, which the Bills kind of did. They got a fumble out of them, but it ultimately was not enough to turn the tides. And it's just, you really got to build a team comparable to them, at least in terms of discipline and not making mistakes. And that's really, really easier said than done. It's really hard to do.
It's just crazy thinking about it earlier, how basically Mahomes kind of turned on like Brock Purdy mode, where he's just like, I've got to manage the game, I've got to not make mistakes, and I've just got to do what it takes to win the game. And that's what he does. And I mean, this performance from Mahomes is great, mainly because he turned into Josh Allen out of nowhere. In terms of running the football.
What the fuck was that? That was unreal. So angry. So angry.
Yeah, if you had, Allen had a rushing touchdown too, right? So all four.
No, Allen did not have a rushing touchdown in that game. He was the only one of the weekend.
Oh, you know what it was? There was a touchdown, and I saw a guy who had a bet for a rushing touchdown in all 8 quarters, and it hit. So and all thanks to Patrick Mahomes, but it feels. I feel a lot of nothing towards the Chiefs dynasty because, obviously growing up in New England and not being a Patriots fan and being very anti-Boston sports in general, you hated the Patriots with a passion. I hated the Patriots. I hated Tom Brady. I hated Bill Belichick. I just don't have strong feelings towards this team. One, because Andy Reid is just such a doofus and just a likable guy. It's kind of hard to necessarily root against Andy Reid.
The coach is definitely polar opposite to the Patriot days.
Exactly. It doesn't quite feel like the evil empire the way the Patriots did. But I think you brought it up last week, where it's those teams were dominant. This team is not. We saw this team win some games by the skin of their teeth. A blocked field goal, that penalty against the or whatever happened against the Raiders there, They kind of got away with some, so you don't feel like it's quite as deserving, but at the same time, I think that's almost just as impressive again, that a team that probably shouldn't be here, again, manages to find their way here again and again and again.
Well, and I think that's the most frustrating part for neutral fans and people wanting parity and people that are, actively hating the Chiefs with every fiber of their being, is that normally when you see a team that plays up or down to their competition, that is a bad trait that tends to bite you eventually. We see this, especially in college basketball, Pat. I feel like you and I are big college basketball guys. It really opens itself up in that sport where so many possessions back and forth, and sometimes you just play down or even up to your competition. But eventually that is going to bite you because you are sort of willingly or unwillingly, it's happening, opting into close games. And eventually, and eventually the variance is going to come back to bite you. For the Chiefs, that hasn't happened. And in fact, Pat, we just saw the Chiefs score over 30 points for the first time all season. They waited until the AFC Championship game to do that. And like you said, Patrick Mahomes turned into Josh Allen, 11 carries for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns. I haven't seen many people mention this. We knew he was running a little more than normal, Pat. I went through the archives. I went through his game logs. That is the most carries he's ever had in a football game in his career. 11 carries, 43 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He completely changed his play style. They completely hit another gear in that game to propel themselves past the Bills and into the Super Bowl, and it's just becoming crazy at this point. And I think it's funny you mentioned that about the Patriots, because the general sentiment I'm starting to see, right or wrong, on social media is people are like, maybe the Patriots dynasty wasn't so bad. And it's like,
exactly, that's crazy to me.
I think there's two things at play there, and I've actually toyed around with maybe making a YouTube video, really diving into the pros and cons of each. Is it really better, worse, whatever you want to call it?
That's a good idea.
I think there's two elements at play. One, there is the inevitable thing that takes over just in sports media all the time and fan reactions, and that is recency bias. Obviously, we're living in the Chiefs dynasty, so it feels like it sucks more.
Absolutely.
People are not remembering maybe everything about the Patriots dynasty, and it's all. And the other aspect of it is, I guess it's really the same thing as the recency bias, but it's people are forgetting the sort of little calls that I think went the Patriots' way back in the day. There were certain calls. I mean, tuck rule, that's not a little call.
Rule.
That is the one people remember, if anything. But this is why I would want to dive into it maybe a little bit deeper. Is I remember there was a playoff game against the Steelers, I think, where might have been Jesse James had arguably a touchdown or something.
Yeah.
There are certain plays that you forget as time goes on, and all you remember is the ultimate result. So people are looking back.
They got a gift when Billy Cundiff shanked a 20-something yard field goal too.
People are looking back and remembering only certain parts. So I'm I really wonder which dynasty is going to be looked back on as being worse. I think right now the most frustrating thing about the Chiefs is that they won't go the fuck away, especially if they win this Super Bowl and they do 3P. It's like the Patriots had about a 10-year lull of not winning any Super Bowls. Now they went a few times and they were always in the mix, but
what happened?
Shut up. But you at least got that reprieve as a neutral fan,
yes.
As somebody wanting parity. You saw other teams win. You saw Peyton Manning take down Brady. You saw Eli Manning take down Brady. You saw even Joe Flacco take down Brady. It's when is the reprieve with the Chiefs? Because we've gotten, over the last 4 years, one? And they weren't even in the Super Bowl. It was the Rams and the Bengals. They managed to have a Super Bowl to kind of break this up. But other than that, you'd have to go back to Brady against the Chiefs in 2020, I think it was. Basically, it doesn't feel like we're getting as many breaks, at least in hindsight, looking at the Patriots
because we
one.
really aren't.
Well, and then the three-peat is going to accentuate that if it happens.
I think the scariest thing about this all is that Patrick Mahomes is 29. It's like the LeBron tweet where it's LeBron's 30. Surely this fuckery can't continue. It's Patrick Mahomes is not going to stop doing this. But the only thing that could potentially stop that is, the Chiefs win again. Does Andy Reid retire? Does Travis Kelce retire? There is a real chance that we see some. And I know that's kind of been said every year the last couple of years now with Andy Reid and such. But you've got to think at some point it's kind of going to happen. So it's Is Mahomes this good where he's going to keep doing this, or is it kind of a combination similar to Brady? Because Brady was good enough, but also, that system was the system with Belichick. Sure. So that'll be interesting to see. And I think a lot of the things about the Chiefs is kind of externally, people don't like Brittany Mahomes. People don't like Jackson Mahomes. That one in particular is rightfully so. People don't like the attention Taylor Swift has brought. Mm-hmm. Because Patrick Mahomes isn't a particularly unlikable guy. I think it's just sort of
it's the overexposure, if anything.
I think that it's his dad plays football for Georgia, the way he gets DUIs. But him himself doesn't, isn't this super unlikable guy. Because Brady was just kind of this pretty boy dick, to trip people and stuff like that. It was easier to hate Brady than it is to hate Mahomes in a vacuum. But
I do think the flopping is hurting Mahomes a little, though.
That flop was
the reputation's getting a little damaged.
That one was egregious. The one
he at least said I probably shouldn't have done that. I'll give him some credit after the fact.
Yeah, and he sounds like Kermit the Frog, which is funny as hell because he's just him and he eats ketchup on everything. But besides that, that's the thing is I think that with how big the Chiefs have been in and around the game, I just think that people are kind of tired of it, and I don't blame you for that. I don't blame you for that at all. I wish we were watching Bills Eagles or Bills Lions or Raiders and Lions, something good like that,
People want parity as neutral fans. When your team's not in the Super Bowl, you want to see different matchups. That's just the nature of it. And so to anybody out there that's like, well, I don't understand the Chiefs hate. I mean, let's take a step back. Yes, you do. Even if it's not, like, maybe things get too personal and people start to say some crazy shit about the Chiefs, but like at the end of the day, the general concept is that people like parity. People like to see different things in Super Bowls. It's really not that complicated. Pat, you talked about, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and something needing to happen for the Chiefs to fuck off and stop making the Super Bowl. To me, this has just become clearer and clearer as time has gone on, and it's Steve Spagnolo is the real thing here that needs to change.
Do we think they promote, like, say they dump Andy Reid, do they promote him? Probably. Like, it's really him or Matt Nagy are the two if they kind of want to go the succession route there. And again,
yeah,
he could pretty much be in the same role he's been. Maybe that's why, maybe he is not inclined to take other head coaching jobs these past few years. I don't know, but it's true. I mean, even going way back to those giant Super Bowls against the Patriots, those defenses were absolute wagons. But, like, Steve Spagnuolo's literally been doing this for almost 20 years now. Like, the guy is a great defensive coordinator. And, yeah, and it's funny because you never think of the Chiefs. You always think of the offense of the Chiefs. Like, oh, they've got Mahomes and Kelsey. But their defense is just always, I think at worst, like, sturdy. Like, I think you would, like,
yeah.
They're never bad. They're always an average or above average defense. Or better, obviously.
And I've kind of been on that train throughout this season is that the offense, and even like the ghost of their offense, like people still, I think, picture the Tyreek Hill deep bombs when they think of the Chiefs offense. I
exactly,
think
yes.
The history and the smokescreen of their offense is what has hid what is really driving this team. Not the only thing driving this team, but something that should get a little more credit, and it is Steve Spagnuolo. I think Chris Jones came out and said it the other day. He was like, as long as we get to keep Steve Spagnuolo, we're going to keep winning like this. And I really do think it's that simple. Steve has a way of just, at the perfect times and more often than not, bamboozling these absolutely elite quarterbacks of the AFC. Josh Allen, in the biggest moment of the season, he still gave Dalton Kincaid a shot, but like that was a play that just completely threw him off.
Kincaid wasn't expecting that ball to be underthrown the way it was.
I know,
because
Allen forced him to throw off his
and
back
people
foot.
are talking about how Khalil Shakir was wide open on the other half of the field. He was, but how in the world was Allen going to get him the ball? Because he was getting absolutely fucking swarmed. And again, like you said, you credit Allen. Allen made the throw. Like, that is mostly on Dalton Kincaid. Like, that is mostly on Dalton Kincaid. I'd give that like an 85-15 in terms of the blame on that one. Yeah. But, and, you can't talk about this game, unfortunately, without the elephant in the room. The first down calls. Some of the ball spotting. Mm-hmm. First of all, I mean, I'll just say it straight up. I think that the concept of sports being rigged is crazy. Like, there are 30 owners in the league. You think all 30 of them are going to sign on and be like, yeah, let's just let the Chiefs win and make a ton of money and, benefit off all this stuff? No, they don't. But I think the bigger problem here isn't favoritism. It's just that, like, the NFL is kind of behind the curve in some of these officiating things. Like, you can tell me that soccer, and sports like soccer and tennis, have the technology where they could tell, was it offsides by this much? Was the ball out by this much? Why in the world are we having 50-year-old men and women who are watching 22 massive bodies, first of all, checking for rules violations as well, spotting a football? Yep. There is no reason whatsoever that should be put on them. They've got enough on their plate. The fact that, and now that they have the Sky Judge where they have the replay assist, why can't the replay assist say, if they have the technology for that, they certainly have the technology to tell where the ball was. Yeah. And again, they're opening themselves up to have these kinds of gaffes in the big situations because, like, a ref misses a pass interference call. Like, that happens in the blink of an eye sometimes. But, like, this is something that you can objectively get correct. And they certainly have the resources to do it. And for whatever reason, they just don't do it. They're like so close with this replay assist and the Sky Judge and all that stuff. They're so close. But there is just no reason in the year 2025 for things like this to be not deciding a football game, but to be greatly influencing the outcome of a football game.
Yeah, I do think the question needs to be directly proposed to Roger Goodell or somebody in power, because we need to know the answer of why something like this hasn't been implemented, because until then, all it's going to do is fan the flames of those people that think it's rigged, because it gives you this
Exactly.
plausible deniability of, it's a judgment call and whatever, like people are going to miss things. Yeah, well, they don't have to. So what is the reason that you're not doing it? Is it you don't trust the technology? Because it's clearly working for these other sports. Soccer is the biggest sport in the world, and they've been using this shit for a long time. Tennis, obviously, very big internationally. And yet the NFL refuses to use this sort of tech that we believe is readily available. So I don't see... I understand almost the perspective of people that think it's rigged, because why aren't we doing these seemingly common sense things, not only from a ball spotting perspective, but from a replay assist perspective, which thankfully it does sound like the NFL is going to start to implement it a little more with some of these roughing the passer calls, which that's a good step. But there's still so much more we can do.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is like you look at like baseball's kind of in a similar situation with the automated balls and strikes. But the difference there is that's like that is every single play. That is so pivotal. Like you need to make sure that is perfect before you implement that. This is not that. Being able to spot a football, why put a fucking chip in the football? Have something like this is way easier.
It doesn't seem that hard.
Exactly. This seems way easier and way less significant in the big picture. But at the same time, again, it's like they are leaving the door open for controversies, and they just don't have to. And I mean, a lot of it does come down to the owners, because again, the owners have to vote on all these rules. And, it's true. There is no real, spitballing here. I can't even think of an idea like, oh, well, maybe for the sake of, devil's advocate this. There's no devil's advocate.
No.
There's no devil's advocate for this.
There's no reason. There's no reason. And the other thing I do want to say, though, on the topic of just it being rigged in the Chiefs' favor, whatever you want to call it, let's just take a step back on to defend Pat and I here on team the NFL is not rigged, and that is fucking insane. I saw a comment the other day that I thought summed it up pretty perfectly. Yeah, the NFL is rigged. Meanwhile, the most popular and marketable team in the NFL hasn't been a contender in 30 years, the Dallas Cowboys. If the NFL was rigged, I promise you the Dallas Cowboys would be in the Super Bowl at least once a decade. They have not been there anywhere near there since the mid-90s, so let's just relax. The Kansas City Chiefs, again taking a step back, Pat, this is a team located in bumblefuck Kansas City, Missouri, who has a quarterback
Kansas, according to some people,
that wasn't supposed to be much coming out of Texas Tech. Like, there is no reason for there to be this grand conspiracy around the Chiefs specifically. It's just the NFL is bad at this.
It's the Taylor Swift thing, but they were there already. It's not like they get all this Taylor Swift publicity and then all of a sudden become the Super Bowl contender. They won the Super Bowl the year before. They were there again 2 years before that. Like, this team that's more so a coincidence that the tight end on that team was able to pull the most famous person in the world because he plays for the best team in football year in and year out.
I'm willing to bet, and maybe some people will disagree with me, but look, we can't deny, right? Last year's Super Bowl was the highest rated Super Bowl of all time. And I think it would be ignorant to say that Taylor Swift didn't have some influence over that fact. However, and maybe people will disagree, like I said, I believe in the year 2025 or next year, 2026, if you had a Super Bowl that was the Dallas Cowboys versus, I don't know, pick a team in the AFC that's really popular that's not the Chiefs, somebody super marketable. The Buffalo Bills, or even, let's say we
Steelers, they're
the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Joe Burrow.
I'm sorry, that game, if you have those kind of brands, the ratings will be close. There's no reason to be like, oh, well, we need to do everything around the Chiefs right now to maximize our money because they have Taylor. Shut the fuck up. It's not rigged. The NFL's refs are just dumb and they have bad process. Anyway, let's move on, Pat, because the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl. The Buffalo Bills are not. Taking it from their perspective now, what more do they have to do? Because what's the move now? We have this discussion every year when teams get eliminated and they fall short of the Super Bowl. We talked about it with the Niners last year. Should they move on from Kyle Shanahan even? These kind of questions are going to come up. Should the Bills move on from Sean McDermott? What is the move here? Because this is even worse than the Niners now, coming up short in the Super Bowl several times. This is the Bills seemingly built to contend, having statistically at least, the best quarterback in the AFC or second best quarterback behind even Lamar Jackson. But this is a team built for it. They've now lost to the Chiefs in the playoffs, 4 times? 0-4? What do we do? How do we get the Bills over the hump?
It's really hard because, like, again, Sean McDermott has at least proven that he can coach and lead a really good football team year in and year out. But at the end of the day, it's all about the hardware, man. Like, you can say, like that's the whole thing for the Bills is that they lost 3 Super Bowls in the 90s. Like, this is basically just
4,
the same iteration of that.
4. 4 Super Bowls. Yeah.
Jesus. But it feels like this is that again, but you're not even getting to the Super Bowl. And there were kind of calls for him after it was last year, right, where they were playing really bad football, and then they figured it out at the end, and it pretty much probably saved his job. If that was like the first tower getting knocked down, and like this was like the second one getting knocked down, and him getting fired would be like the Pentagon getting hit. Okay. Sorry. Whoops. I was just trying to think how Sean McDermott would think in that situation.
Sean McDermott's.
I never want him to leave for that reason only. That is the most him invoking fucking Osama bin Laden is like the fucking most wild thing that's ever happened, and I never want that man out of football.
Yeah, well, clearly whatever he was invoking hasn't been working because the Bills cannot get over the hump. I'm torn, Pat. Because this feels exactly like the Kyle Shanahan discussion we had last year, where you don't necessarily see it being blatantly his fault, but at the same time, the Bills don't seem to be fully ready for these moments. Like, at least, look, the Bills played a good game, don't get me wrong. But to start that game especially, Josh Allen almost threw the ball directly to the other team twice on the first drive of the game. Luckily, both those interception possibilities got dropped, and that didn't happen. But it just doesn't seem like this team... It doesn't seem like this team necessarily has the identity that maybe it should to get over the hump. They're able to get really far and then not finish the job, which again was the same argument with Kyle Shanahan. But the risk reward for firing Kyle Shanahan is a lot different to firing Sean McDermott, because I think every team in the NFL would be lining up to hire Kyle Shanahan. I don't think that's necessarily true for Sean McDermott, which is why I think
certainly not to the same degree.
Maybe you make a change. I don't know.
And if you're comparing the two here, like, I think Kyle Shanahan is way more responsible for the 49ers' success
100%,
than Sean
100%.
McDermott is. Look, he brought a guy from Eastern Illinois to the Super Bowl and is now Mr. Irrelevant. Is turned into an above-average NFL quarterback.
He's about to earn Mr. Irrelevant about $50 million a year.
That's what I mean. In this system, he does that. It's like, you get rid of Kyle Shanahan, you're threatening that whole structure. If you get rid of Sean McDermott, I don't think necessarily a whole lot changes. And I mean, like, you could look at it like, who would they turn to? Would they want a completely clean slate? I mean, Joe Brady is there. Joe Brady is a guy who got multiple interviews this year. He will be a head coach soon. Or do they wipe the slate completely clean? And there's not any sort of, like, really established guy, if that's the way they want to go, like Mike McCarthy. Like, because Pete Carroll's gone, Bill Belichick is gone, not available. It's like, I feel like you don't get rid of McDermott unless you have a really good contingency. And I just don't see the direction they would go in right now. So, like, all that said, like, yeah, I think they should hang on to McDermott, but, like, this is really it.
On the flip side, I wonder what the downside is of getting rid of Sean McDermott, though, because you've seen this Bills team now. Like, what do we think happens if they get rid of Sean McDermott? Are they going to miss the playoffs? I don't think so. They're getting to the playoffs anyway.
No.
You need a coach that's going to get you over the hump. This is not, again, I'm only comparing to Kyle Shanahan because that was the last time we talked about firing a head coach after, making it to either a Super Bowl or a championship game like this, because they just repeatedly can't get the job done. The difference is, like, the Bills with Josh Allen are always going to have the floor of being a great offensive team. They have great talent on the defensive side as well. I think you have the floor there. You need somebody that can kind of break through the ceiling. And we're at a point now, Pat, again, it's been 4 times. How much more time are you going to waste? When is the turning point of like, okay, we need to make a change because this Mahomes guy and these Chiefs guys aren't going away. We now have 4 examples of you not being able to get us over the hump. How much more leeway are we going to give you? Because I've always generally been on the side of, the NFL is a small sample size league. These are these are individual games that you're looking at, and these games can be decided by one play here, one play there, and you shouldn't make big sweeping conclusions off of such small samples. But the sample's not that small anymore. It's been 4 times. I feel like the right move for the Bills at this point is to move on, try to find somebody that can maybe change the energy. If for no other reason than like, this being the 4th time, when we get to a 5th time, there's going to be an element of, oh no, here we go again. Like that's going to be the mindset. It's like, to bring it back to college basketball again, Pat, it's like when Purdue made the tournament every year and just would constantly get upset early in the rounds. And it was like they got in their own head. They got in their own heads about it. You could kind of tell. Like they would face these shitty mid-major teams.
Well, Fairleigh Dickinson is a quality program.
Yeah, straight out of the NEC. I think just to change the vibe, to change the energy, I think maybe moving on is the move. I don't know. The Bills got to do something, man, because they're making me sad at this point. I just want to see Josh Allen win a ring, man. I want to see, not only for parity's sake, but I like Josh, even as a Patriots fan.
Booger McFarland had a really good kind of soliloquy or whatever, just like, is Josh Allen just kind of born at the wrong time? Like, it's just unfortunate that we're looking at an incredible talent just going up against, when it's all said and done, possibly the greatest quarterback ever, who happens to be playing for a Hall of Fame coach. At the same time, it's like, he does need more help. Like, they need to find him a number 1 target because, like, Stephon Diggs, the talent fit, but personality-wise, he just wasn't a fit. And it showed with Diggs there that can work. Because, you even look at teams like the Patriots for all those years, it's like they don't need a number 1 receiver. This team, I think he needs a number 1 receiver. Amari Cooper is not that. Keon Coleman looked good in his rookie year. I do not think he is that. Dalton Kincaid, they may never use him well enough to be, that kind of premium target. So, like,
Dalton Kincaid's not good. I don't think
they need to go out there. They need to go out there and find him a guy, because obviously he's fantastic. James Cook was kind of a scary thought fantasy-wise just because his Allen get a vulture, everything, this and that. Silenced all that. If that backfield stays the same, even with Ray Davis looking solid, James Cook is a great running back. It's like he just needs a little more help, at least from the offensive side of the ball. Defense, that's a whole other story. But offensively, he still needs that one missing piece, and it's a big piece too.
Yeah, it's hard because you look at, they got rid of Stephon Diggs. I mean, valid questions of how much he had left. And you kind of create this more open offense of we don't have a number 1 target. Josh can just do whatever he wants. And it created a really nice season for Josh himself, a borderline MVP season. I think he's going to end up finishing second here to Lamar, but very much in the conversation. But yeah, you come down, especially at the end of that game, some of the play calling, like I tweeted about it. I was like, the Bills seem to think Keon Coleman's a lot better than he actually is because they kept just targeting him in one-on-ones with Trent McDuffie. And it was like, guys, Keon Coleman is not that guy. Maybe he develops into somebody that can handle that, but he's not that guy right now. I saw somebody in our chat too say, give McDermott 2 more years and then figure out and then move on to the next head coach.
Is a lot.
Guys, Josh will be 31. 31 to start that season.
Here he goes with his old people hatred.
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. He'll be 31 if we were to wait 2 more years to fire Sean McDermott, 2 more years to figure out if he's the guy or not. You wait that long to make that mistake, Josh might only have 3 more years of his prime at that point. Like that's you start to generally fall off as a quarterback around age 34. Now, he's a great player. I imagine he can play pretty effectively to like 37, 38. But like, you gonna take that risk? This is the best quarterback your franchise has ever had.
I was going to say, you've got a guy who will probably, when it's all said and done, at least from statistics, we'll see with the accolades, will wind up in Canton. And he is playing the best football of his career right now. You just can't sit back in cruise control and let that happen. Yet here I am saying they should do that for 1 more year just because I just don't see the
If you keep him around for 1 more year, you need to get him a major A1 weapon on offense to say, if it doesn't work out this year, we need to make a huge change. I think the Bills kind of went from last year to this year not necessarily making huge changes. I mean, they got rid of Diggs. That was big. But it was change by subtraction. I think that the Bills need to show people, they need to show their fan base that, like, this is our last stand sort of all-in move before, if we're not going to do it now, before we make a drastic move like firing the head coach and moving on. They need to do something, because if they head into next season with roughly the same cast, or they only add to it through the draft, I think that's going to be a mistake. They need to stop trying to waste Josh Allen.
They at least need to do something drastic, even if it's doesn't involve Sean McDermott. Obviously, what the Bart Simpson's meme, say the line, T. Higgins. Like, they will be
every
in
team
line
in the NFL is getting T. Higgins.
They will be in line. They will be in the same line where it's like, yes, T. Higgins would be huge for a team like this. So we'll see. It's going to be a long, long, long offseason in Buffalo, as it has been the last half decade.
All right, let's move on to Eagles Commanders, Pat. We just spent half an hour commiserating about the fucking Chiefs. The Eagles, dominant performance in this one.
My goodness.
This one, the score was certainly inflated from what we expected, but this one kind of went as you would have expected if you looked at it on paper and ignored the fact that the Commanders had put together this magical run. This was kind of what you would have expected, because the Commanders came in with one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. The Eagles came in with a running back who put together the most historic season since Eric Dickerson, behind one of the league's best offensive lines, albeit it was a little bit dinged up. The Eagles, 7 rushing touchdowns. Took advantage of this terrible run defense. Even Will Shipley got in on the action at the end of the game to put the Eagles up to this ridiculous 55-point total. On top of their run game dominating, Hertz actually had one of his better throwing games in a while as well. The Eagles were just doing whatever they wanted in this one. I mean, Pat, the Eagles look really good. For as much as we are nervous about the Chiefs pulling off a three-peat, I am happy. Again, especially after watching that game, because it was something we talked about last week. Like, if it ended up being Commanders-Chiefs, I worry that the magic will run out in the Super Bowl. I think we've got a real threat here for the Chiefs in stopping their three-peat.
Yeah, they are just playing great football at the right time, both sides of the ball. I mean, the big question here for the Eagles is going to be their offensive line. But fortunately, that's the best part. I'd argue the only good part about the 2-week separation to the Super Bowls. It just gives some of these players times with these injuries to get healthy and get right. But they're just looking good in literally sick on the first play from scrimmage. That man was gone. That man was fucking gone, and still didn't hit his prop. By the way, a lot of people were.
I know. I bet the over on his prop.
We're not happy about. We're not happy about that one, especially after that first play. But just to have a guy again, I could just be talking out of my ass here, but when was the last time we had a running back just playing completely out of his mind like this, week in, week out? Was it CJ 3K or Adrian Peterson?
I mean, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's really
yards. Good,
Derrick Henry had a season like this 4 years ago. But other than that, it's very rare. It's very rare.
Yeah, those guys I just named, Derrick Henry, Adrian Peterson, Chris Johnson, those were at their peaks at least, some of the elite, and this guy is just playing out of his fucking mind. And I feel like even without the line, he'll be fine. It's just going to be a matter of protecting Jalen Hurts, giving Hurts the time to do what he needs to do to avoid making mistakes against what we, have talked about as being a really good defense right now.
Yeah, so that is what I think it's going to come down to as well. Jalen Hurts, Pat, has not thrown an interception since November 10th. He's doing an incredible job holding on to the football. I don't have the fumble stats, but I do know he's only fumbled and lost the fumble twice all year. So either way, even if that has occurred at some point since November, he has barely turned the ball over in the last 3 months, essentially, of football. If he can continue that trend against a Steve Spagnolo defense, again, easier said than done, I do very much think the Eagles have a shot here because of the run game, because of their defense, which is, again, as far as the regular season goes, it was the best in the league in terms of points allowed, I believe. Let me confirm that, actually. I want to talk out of my ass. But the defense still incredibly, incredibly good and is going to give the Chiefs, I think, a little bit more of a fit than the Bills defense did. Let me pull this up. 17.8 points per game. Sorry, they were 0.1 points allowed worse than the Chargers defense. Yeah, go Chargers.
I just got to say, I just Googled fucking Eagles injury report, and the first thing is man on life support after falling from light pole during Eagles celebrations. That wasn't what I was looking for, Google.
Sir, your team hasn't even won the Super Bowl yet. If you're going to kill yourself off a light pole, at least wait until then. Yeah, the Eagles seem like a very well-rounded team. It's going to come down to Hertz. We've unfortunately, roasted Hertz a little bit for saying that if there was a weak point on this team, it is him. But if he's going to keep playing clean like this, I think the Eagles have a real shot. And yeah, it's not really a weak spot. Looking at it from the Commanders side of things, God, how annoying for them, man. Jaden Daniels, as a rookie in the NFC Championship game, plays as clean as possible. That signature poise is still there. And somehow the Commanders lose 3 fumbles by 3 different guys. Like the ball was fucking greased up or something. Diami Brown, sadly, friend of the show, Austin Eckler, and Jeremy McNichols, all losing fumbles on separate occasions, giving the Commanders no chance. Now, look, it was 55-23. The Commanders probably lose that game anyway, but the Eagles did turn all 3 of those fumbles into touchdowns. If you don't have those fumbles, Pat, there's a better chance that this game is like a 35-35 go to overtime type of game. So even though the point differential looks huge, the fumbles were a major contributor to that.
No, and bad timing. And then there was that one, what was it, a roughing the passer? There was some unnecessary roughness penalty that gave the Eagles a first down. Again, at the end of the day, you could cry momentum this, momentum that. It didn't matter. They blew their fucking doors off after that. But yeah, I mean, these things happening in pivotal times is not going to win you football games. And that was just the big difference here was that, like you said, Jalen Hurts does not make mistakes. This Eagles team does not really make the same kind of mistakes. And the Commanders, a young, inexperienced team, did. And, the Eagles were a better team by 30 points. I don't think so necessarily coming into the game, but they were just a better team. But to see Jalen Daniels like that, and, it sucks to not see him really kind of be able to go and really fight, toe-to-toe with a division rival in the NFC Championship game. That would have been a lot of fun to watch. But, again, they just got beat by a much better team right now.
Well, and again, like, as much as I want to say it's youth, I mean, I guess inexperience and youth are, lack of playoff experience and youth kind of go hand in hand and are kind of the same thing. But it's like 2 of the fumbles were, again, Eckler, longtime veteran in the league. Jeremy McNichols has been in the NFL since 2017 now. Diami Brown is the youngest one of them. I believe he came in what, 2020?
Whenever Amon-Ra did.
I know, whenever year Amon-Ra did.
That's the only reason I remember who Diami Brown, basically.
Somewhere around that time. But it's like, it's one of those things, like, I feel like losing fumbles is the most annoying sort of thing to view as a fan and for trying to evaluate not whether a team deserved to win, because obviously the team that's not fumbling deserves, but like fumbles feel fluky at times because it's like if you're not doing it all throughout the year and it's not a habit that you have, why is it happening now? Like ball security, I wouldn't think is something that is really affected that much by the moment of the game by guys that have played so much football over the course of their careers, but I guess maybe it is. As far as the Commanders go, Pat, looking forward, obviously they are well ahead of schedule. This feels kind of like it feels kind of like the Texans convo we had last year. Even though the Texans didn't get to the championship game, they still won a playoff game a year after winning barely any games. The Commanders were now 1 game away from the Super Bowl. Their focus for the offseason, I think, it's hard because, again, you don't want to overreact too much to what cost them in this game because it's like, well, okay, let's just go get the guys that never fucking fumble the ball. I think defense has to be the main focus of the offseason. Again, Jaden Daniels is the only rookie quarterback to ever start in a conference championship game without a top 3 defense backing him up. The Commanders' defense was 18th in the league this year in terms of points allowed.
They were 100th yesterday on Sunday.
They were, I believe their run defense specifically was 29th in the league or 30th in the league. So that was even worse than just their overarching defense. So they definitely need to focus on defense. And I think just a little more help for Daniels. He doesn't seem to need a lot because that's how good he is. Zack Herz is his best friend, I guess. Zack Herz had an incredible game on top of
him and Cliff Kingsbury share a bathtub. I'm convinced that those two.
Something, man.
Zack Herz had a year, man. Like we'll see next year. We'll see next year what happens in that situation. But Terry's great.
If Zack Ertz leaves, that's like a legitimate loss for them. Like they need to compensate with not only, I'm saying we need to add to the weapons they already have. If they lose Zack Ertz and add somebody who's not T. Higgins, but like somebody who's really good, that's just a net neutral. Like if you lose Zack Ertz, you need to add two pieces because Jaden Daniels really, really had a connection with Ertz.
Is he going to leave his boyfriend though? Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, it's a matter of I think we all thought Zack Ertz was going to retire like 4 years ago, and he just didn't.
I thought he was retired.
I mean, he's 34. I don't know the exact date of birth, November, so he'll be 35 middle of next season. I guess he'll probably stick around. I mean, tight ends tend to stick around for a while if they're.
You're looking at a situation though in Washington where like Terry McLaurin is great. Like he finally has the quarterback that he needs. But you look past that again. You're looking at De'Ami Brown. You're looking at Olamide Zaccheaus. Zack Ertz having to be this important. It's like, I think that actually, while the free agent wide receivers like aren't fantastic, I think they kind of need more of like a veteran complement, like a Keenan Allen, like a Hollywood Brown, someone like that.
Hollywood I could understand.
Just to sort of be like a dust. Well, but I mean, just more so from the perspective of like, you just kind of want a sturdy, guy who has accomplished things. And actually, I mean, that's kind of outside of T. Higgins, really. That's mainly like Amari Cooper's another guy like that. Like, that's what this free agent class for wide receivers is kind of all about. And I mean, obviously, there's the draft as well. And obviously, they struck gold on Daniels. So let's see, maybe they could strike gold on a weapon for him. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel like they just need somebody to add not a different dynamic to this offense, but just somebody else for the defense to truly worry about. I kind of feel like the Commanders have the whole veteran leadership thing locked up between Zack Ertz, Bobby Wagner on defense, Austin Eckler, if he sticks around. Austin Eckler, I think, was on a 1-year deal, so he might be
where he should stick around? Brand coverage.
Very true. Let me actually look up if he was on a 1-year deal or not.
Let me slide.
Oh no, he signed a 2-year deal with the Commanders, so theoretically he will be there next year as well. Yeah, I just think, I don't know whether it's a trade or whether it's free agency. They got to get somebody that's not Olamide Zaccheaus or De'Ami Brown to play meaningful snaps at the wide receiver position.
Jamison, godforsaken Crowder,
alongside Terry McLaurin and Jamison Crowder. And again, this is the time, especially, to not waste time because you have Jaden Daniels, who I talked last week and I still believe is a top 5 quarterback already. He's at least top 10 already. He's on a rookie deal, Pat. Go fucking spend some money and get some good players to put around him and see what you can do. Don't pull a 49ers, not that they did it intentionally. They did their best. Don't pull a 49ers and fall short during the rookie contract and then find yourself suddenly having to pay the guy and making it a lot harder on yourselves. I think now is the time to not waste time. Go out, get your guys, make this offense, a real problem because it already was one with Olamide Zaccheaus getting significant work. And see what you can end up doing because the Commanders have a real chance here to win a Super Bowl in the next few years with the way Daniels is playing. All right, Super Bowl prediction, Pat. Official Super Bowl prediction. It's the Chiefs. It's the Eagles. Who are you going with?
Chiefs -1.5. Hedge the bet. The Chiefs win. The Chiefs cover. The Chiefs cover. You're happy you win some money. They lose. Awesome. If they win by 1, you kill yourself. Boom. Perfect. That's my plan.
Have you decided that that's who you think is going to win, or is that just your optimal bet, or both?
Well, that is what I have actually already placed money on this. Yes.
Have you convinced yourself that you actually think they're going to win by virtue of the bet you made, or is that an independent thought?
No, that was an independent thought just to get some kind of like I said, if they win by 1, it's over for your boy. But like some kind of good from either side here. But obviously, again, it depends on, Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson. Those guys are healthy here, but the Eagles are just playing really, really good football right now, and I don't know if they'll necessarily, not that the Bills made a ton of mistakes, but I think if any team right now is going to go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs in terms of playing smart football, taking care of things, it's the Eagles. It's the Eagles. I think, honestly, if we needed a team to take this Chiefs team down, I think the Eagles are the best bet.
Yeah, I mean, I picked the Eagles at the start of it all, Pat. I gotta stick with them now. I'm gonna go with the Eagles nervously to finish it off. They do need their O-line healthy for sure, because that is probably the biggest strength of this team, and especially going up against this Spags defense, they need all of these veteran linemen and good linemen healthy and ready to go. I think the fact that Cam Jurgens, even though he was effectively ruled out but still active and then ended up playing in their last game, the fact he ended up playing tells me that, obviously he's probably going to play in the Super Bowl as well with given 2 weeks more time. And hopefully Landon Dickerson can get healthy by then as well. It seems like they're going to be okay. Hopefully they are at close-ish to full strength with the 2 weeks off. I'll go with the Eagles. I will. I think it's just the pessimist in me that is picturing Hertz's collapse coming in the Super Bowl. But I'm going to go with what he's shown us over the last 3 months of the season, because any sort of collapse that might be possible within him, Pat, there hasn't been a lot asked of him because of how good everything else operates around him. So I just got to hope that continues to be the case. I don't think the Chiefs are just going to be able to fully say, we're going to make Hertz beat us with his arm and we're going to shut down Saquon Barkley. That's much easier said than done, although I'm sure that will be roughly the game plan if they're going to make them lean one way or the other. But I'll go with the Eagles. I think, I picked them from the jump, man, so I'm going to keep picking them here. All right. Moving on to the coaching carousel, Pat. We had a few significant moves here in the coaching carousel.
Basically all the rest of them.
Most notably,
Duval.
Our boy Liam Coen is a fucking goon. I said I miss the days when I just knew him as the offensive genius for the Buccaneers and didn't kind of know what his personality was, because apparently he's a fucking weirdo. But to his credit, it does seem like this could be his Dan Campbell biting kneecaps moment, as I've seen many people point out. At the time, that was criticized, and it was like, dude, what the fuck are you talking about? This is such a bad hire. You're not the one to turn around this team if you're saying cringy shit already. I think Liam Coen could end up being a good hire, but this story was crazy.
Insane.
This story was nuts, the way this developed.
To see the report that, hey, they're extending Liam Coen, blah, 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 blah. And then for the report to come out that, not only has Liam Coen, not signed his contract, they haven't fucking heard from him.
Right.
They haven't even heard from him at all.
Yeah, he ghosted him. The story, just nuts. So the Jags, fire Trent Baalke super late in the game.
They made the right decision, but how the fuck could you have not foreseen that needing to happen here?
Yeah,
to get anybody to go coach there. Trent Baalke is just a bad GM at this point in his life, possibly in general.
100%. But they fire Baalke, better late than never. So, that entices Coen. And then Coen has to go behind the Bucs' back to take this meeting because it was part of his contract, even though the contract was unsigned at the time, that he couldn't take another meeting for head coach. So he did it quietly just to keep his options open, basically, with Tampa. Well, and then he ends up as the Jags head coach. So, sure, I guess.
I think the nasty part about it that's flying under the radar is just the fact that the Jags also needed to keep it hush-hush because they needed another Patrick Graham interview to satisfy the rule.
That's right. And they didn't want him to cancel.
Obviously, if Graham knew Coen was going back, and again, just unfortunate. Patrick Graham's a great coach. It doesn't seem like he's going to stick with the Raiders, but it sucks kind of see him be a pawn. And I just got real icky vibes from that, and I think that's kind of been lost in all this just because Liam Coen just literally just fucking ghosted his employer, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of all employers. Just absolutely insane, absolutely hilarious. And it's funny because this was kind of what we expected all along. Right out of the gate, Liam Coen was the betting favorite for this position, and it must have been a hang-up with Trent Baalke. It had to have been, where they're giving Coen unprecedented power as a first-time head coach to essentially pick his GM and have a lot of say in player personnel. They really must believe in this guy. But again, we, saw what he's done in Tampa Bay to maintain an offense vacated by Dave Canales. People were worried about that. We were worried. He clearly showed what he's capable of. He is now the third guy that is going to need to make Trevor Lawrence be Trevor Lawrence. Mm-hmm. And I think that they went the old guy route with Doug Peterson. I think this is the best way you could go with kind of one of these younger, flashier offensive minds. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to happen, but if Trevor Lawrence is going to play to his full potential, Liam Coen is a great bet, probably the best bet they could have done.
Yeah, I think it's a great hire. We talked about it in a similar vein with guys like, Ben Johnson, where you don't necessarily know what kind of leadership they're going to bring. That's kind of the wild card.
He doesn't know his left from right.
But fuck, I forgot about that. But these are the guys that you need to take a gamble on. Like if they flame out and they're terrible leaders and they can't galvanize the team, that sucks. But at least
Jags are used to dumping their coaches every other year anyway.
It's a chance. There's always a chance you run into a guy like that anyway, unless you play it literally as safe as possible with like a Mike McCarthy type. But even then, it's like you've seen, he's had a capped ceiling in the past, basically since the one Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl that he won with Green Bay. These are the kind of coaches that this day and age you need to be taking your shots on. So we'll see what he can do as a leader. The press conference moment is a funny kind of standout to start the process, but at the very least, I think it was a good hire. I think this is something that allows Jags fans to be optimistic for what their offense can look like. It allows them to not be terrorized by Press Taylor anymore. Liam Coen can kind of bring some juice into this, and also for anybody that it thinks this was unprofessional or whatever, it was definitely a little weird the way the process played out. But I'll say this, Liam Coen doesn't owe the Buccaneers anything. Let's not forget, and we'll get to this in a few minutes, Bobby Slowick was a really highly touted head coaching candidate this time last year. He just got fired. So Liam Coen, it's not a guarantee that he's a hot head coaching candidate this time next year if he were to stick with the Bucs. You got to take these opportunities when you get them. There's no loyalty on either side, so let's just throw that out the window.
I agree.
As far as, Pat, we are a fantasy football podcast, mostly, at least during the season. Fantasy implications here now for this move, for the Bucs and the Jags. Let's start with the Bucs. We've been down as this stock down as you're making the stock up motion, but we've been down this road with the Bucs before, right? They lost Dave Canales. We were worried. They got Liam Coen out of their ass. They lose Liam Coen. Who are they going to pull out of their ass this time? It sounds like it might be Nick Caley from the Rams. And if they get him, that is the most obvious. Of course, they did that move ever. Yeah. A hot candidate for offensive coordinator jobs, basically everywhere early in the process, and a Rams Sean McVay disciple. Kind of just lines up perfectly if the Bucs were to go with him. So that would make a lot of sense. So we'll see who they ultimately end up with.
That's what it's going to come down to. Yeah. Chris Godwin's a free agent. We'll see if he's back there. But, we'll talk about it with the Jags. That run game was phenomenal under Liam Coen. And, maybe you're thinking maybe it's part of a Todd Bowles philosophy. It's like, I'm not ready to really go anywhere with the Bucs, good or bad, until we see what they wind up doing here. But for the Jags, man, this is good.
Yeah.
This is good. And again, even if it's not good for Trevor Lawrence, I think it will be good enough to the point where he's playing enough football where we're looking at BTJ. I was surprised whenever we were talking about it, how highly touted he was, going early second round here.
Early fantasy projections have him even late first or early second round.
See, now I can fuck with that a little bit more now. Just because if we can see this offense operate the way that Tampa did last year, because Tampa, Godwin was a stud when he was in. Mike Evans had 1,000 yards, of course. We even saw a great stretch from Cade Otton, such an effective run game. And, Jacksonville potentially has the cast of characters there. You've got Evan Engram. Christian Kirk is still there, isn't he? I think he was on a 3-year deal, right? So they've still got Christian Kirk. The question is, who is their running back? We saw Tank Bigsby kind of make, I don't want to say a leap, but he showed that he could be an NFL running back after being brutal his rookie year. And Travis Etienne kind of went in the other direction. It's like, is this a case where Coen can continue to grow Bigsby? Is this a case where he's going to be able to bring Etienne back to life? Because we have seen a lot of really good things from Travis Etienne before. Is this going to be like in Tampa, a nasty running back by committee? But at least with Tampa's Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, you could start both of those guys through at least through the latter part of the year. Honestly, in an ideal scenario, that's probably the case because then you're getting better value on both of them as well.
Yeah, it's a situation where my gut feeling is that they're going to draft somebody, be it in, probably not a day one kind of thing, unless, God, they end up Genty, imagine that. we're probably looking at more of a day 2 kind of thing, or even day 3. I'll be very interested in whatever rookie they draft if they do, because you've got this guy coming in who is seemingly a guru of the run game, and if he's getting a guy that it'll be perceived, and I mean probably accurate, is his guy if they draft him as soon as he gets there, that'll certainly be a fun storyline to follow. But if they don't draft anybody, or if they draft somebody just super late who's irrelevant, yeah, I mean, I'll probably be in on both Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne, because Pat, again, it's one of those situations, it's almost a really nice opportunity for fantasy drafters, because not only does it seem like a more uncertain situation, but Bigsby and Etienne will kind of both suppress each other's fantasy values to the point where I don't think you're going to have to pay a lot to go for these guys who either one of them I could see breaking out under Coen. We've seen both of them have good seasons now. Bigsby this past year, Etienne, to a much higher degree, but better last year. I think there's a chance for either one of them to be very good under Liam Coen, and I'm excited to see what he can bring to this offense and what he can get out of it.
We saw Sean Tucker lose his fucking shit.
Oh my God!
In one game, so like Liam Coen, all of the Rashad White doubts and whatnot, the inefficiencies in his game, he had another damn productive year. Like maybe Coen can just extract someone out of anybody, but again, if he does bring in a rookie, you've got to like that, because you tend to like the guys that the coaches bring in. Liam Coen has no allegiance to Travis Etienne, no allegiance to Tank Bigsby. Yeah. If they do bring in a running back, especially, maybe day 2 more so.
Hell, there were a ton of Etienne trade rumors at the middle of last season. So, like,
I think there's a real chance. Yeah, I think there's a real chance here that could be one of the bigger impact fantasy draft picks here if they do something at running back.
Yeah, 100%. And just one for the road here.
Duval.
All right, the Cowboys have hired Brian Schottenheimer.
I should have went all in. Last week I'm like, I'm not going to go to the extent and predict he's going to go there, but I could see them making I should have just went fucking all in. This was the most Jerry Jones move that Jerry Jones could have made. I'm Jerry Jones. First of all, he's a fucking lunatic. That press conference was ironically and unironically hilarious. Absolute art. But Brian Schottenheimer's been around for a long time. It helps when your dad is a great coach in the NFL here. And we've kind of seen him, at least in the latter part of his career, kind of flame out in Seattle. And now come to Dallas here and seemingly fall into a head coaching job, when there were a lot of really good candidates out there. And you could kind of tell, I think, that this was going to happen all along, because you just look at the guys that they brought in to interview. Leslie Frazier and, but it was only, first of all, it was only 5 guys. And it was none of like the Joe Bradys, the Todd Munkins, any of those big names. Jerry just wants his guy. Oh, Kellen Moore was an interesting one, of course, but like Jerry wanted his guy because Jerry wants to have all the control over this team. And he wanted to be a coach, but wanted to drive nicer cars and fly in bigger planes. Dude, fuck you, dude. Like, get fucked, man. Like, you haven't done shit in 20 years. You are 80 years old, dude. Die. No, don't just give it up. Die.
It's so bad, Pat. It's just such an uninspiring process, an uninspiring hire. They didn't, like you said, with the guys they were considering, they really were operating in just their own little bubble because Jerry thinks he knows better than everyone and he's going to interview these guys rather than all the hot coaching candidates. It's like, dude, what has given you the idea you know better than anybody at this point? You guys haven't actually done shit since before I was born. Pat, I was going through some old videos on my phone.
Yeah,
we're
unk, dude. And they're fucking.
And I went to WrestleMania in Dallas a couple years ago, and obviously they had the banners. And I was like, I made a joke. I was like, the last time they put up a banner was before I was born. It was 1995, I think, Super Bowl champion. Like, what are we doing? Like, can we go outside the box a little? Like, it's just so bad. It's so bad. All you did was go with the safest option possible, and it's not even safe because you haven't done shit.
I feel like Brian Schottenheimer's kind of getting, I think he's just not going to get a fair shake out of this because, granted, he could prove to be a good head coach. I think it's just more so the critical fact about Jerry Jones and his process and just who he is at this point, more so than how Brian Schottenheimer actually could be as a head coach. He could prove us all wrong and be a head coach, but it's just like look at these guys. Jason Garrett, Mike McCarthy, even if they brought Kellen Moore in, who at least would have been an interesting, a fun hire, he's still somebody that came up the coaching ranks in Dallas, where Jerry Jones still would have had a stranglehold over him. But of course, if you're Brian Schottenheimer, he's probably a guy who never thought he hasn't gotten a head coaching interview in a few years. Of course, he's gonna take his shot after being in the league for 20 years. To be a head coach. I mean, we'll see what he can do, because again, this roster isn't terrible.
No, and that's the thing I want to make very clear is that with Dak Prescott healthy, this team can put together a good season in spite of how mid as fuck this hire was. This hire does not doom the Cowboys to, 0 playoff appearances until they move on from Schottenheimer. I'm not saying it's that bad. It's just, if you are going to move on from Mike McCarthy, why are you moving on from Mike McCarthy and hiring a guy who's just been working under Mike McCarthy and has not been touted as a huge reason for their success? There was no real avenue
I didn't even
to
know
logic.
He was there. I knew I knew Mike Zimmer was their defensive coordinator. I didn't know until about halfway through the year that Brian Schottenheimer was even their OC.
He was the post-Kellen Moore OC. Yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense other than Jerry wanting to go with familiarity. And I hope it bites them, just because I don't, obviously I don't like the Cowboys by nature, because I don't think anybody likes the Cowboys, but I also want to see Jerry Jones suffer for his decisions, because he's just a fucking moron at this point. The Cowboys are considering Falcons tight end coach Kevin Koger for their offensive coordinator. Just for, fantasy purposes and offensive coordinator considerations. It seems like he might be in the lead. I'll say this. It's very funny that they are considering hiring the guy that's been trying to get the most out of Kyle Pitts for the last few years and has been unable to do so. Nonetheless,
was he not only a one-year guy? Maybe this guy came in under Raheem Morris?
At least he tried to do it last year and
I'd like to try to give him the benefit of the doubt here.
Kevin Koger, I'm just going to say Koger and hope I'm right. Falcons tight ends coach. Okay, it was only last year. Before that, Los Angeles Chargers tight ends coach, 2021 to 2023. So, God,
he laid the groundwork for Stone Smart.
He did. How was that? And the ghost of Ladarius Green. Remember him?
Remember the random tight ends draft? That was fun. We should just do that again, but not be allowed to take any of the same guys.
I'm in. I'm just drafting Ladarius Green again. You can't stop me. Matt Eberflus also got hired as the defensive coordinator in Dallas, just to make things even funnier. I actually think that's a good hire.
He's a good defensive coordinator.
The meme ability is just off the charts lately with what the Cowboys have been doing. All right. A hire we do actually like as head coach, another one here. The Jets have hired Aaron Glenn. We talked about that move, seeming like it was trending that way for a while. They also hired Darren Muji as their GM, most recently the assistant GM for the Broncos. So the Jets have been set up here now for the future. I like the vibe that Aaron Glenn brings. Again, he's saying all the right things. He seems like he's a good leader. He seems like he is very comfortable in the role. Again, this will all come down to the coordinator hires for how this team will actually operate on the field. As we've talked about before, you can motivate guys as much as you want, but if coordinators are holding you back, then there's not a whole lot that motivation is going to do. Right now, sounds like Tanner Engstrad might be following Aaron Glenn from Detroit over here to be the OC, and Steve Wilkes could be the defensive coordinator, which is, I think, a very smart hire as well, because Glenn had emphasized wanting a guy with head coach experience to come help him. I mean, I think that's a slam dunk hire on multiple fronts.
And yeah, even though Steve Wilkes had that one disastrous year in Arizona, he got scapegoated in San Francisco. Shanahan needed someone to throw under the bus in that situation. That's another guy who's been around football forever that is a great defensive coordinator and would be a great hire. And yeah, I feel like Aaron Glenn is just like a football guy. For once, a lot of these guys that get picked as head coaches weren't necessarily good players. He was a really good player when he played. And it seems like he might be someone to stand up to Woody Johnson, stand up to Aaron Rodgers if he's still around, that may not put up with the same kind of shit the way someone like Robert Saleh, who is just kind of like almost like a wet blanket type hire.
Well, yeah. What I really liked from Aaron Glenn's just initial talking to the media is he said, like, right off the bat, like, I'm going to nip this in the bud. This team is not about Aaron Rodgers. We've talked to him. We're open to all possibilities going forward, but, like, that's not the focus of this team, and that's that. Like, he wasn't trying to avoid it. He wasn't even remotely going to allow the notion of, like, Rodgers has any power under this new regime. So I really like the way he approached things. I think he's the right guy for the job here. And on the Rodgers front, by the way, it does seem like Jets are open to bringing him back. And also on that front, Woody Johnson actually said, I have to look in the mirror and be a better owner. So two, I think, interesting developments for the Jets. Johnson with some self-reflection, maybe because, Pat, like you said, Aaron Glenn is, maybe standing up to him a little bit, or at least presenting the vibe of like, hey, dude, let me run this fucking team. But as far as the Aaron Rodgers thing goes, that'll be interesting. I had said on the show maybe last week or 2 weeks ago that in order for this team to have a truly fresh start, they need to get rid of him. I still believe that. But, I mean, hey, if Glenn is bringing a strong enough presence as a leader and saying, dude, shut the fuck up, you've got like a year left, let's just keep this team afloat while we kind of rebuild a little bit, maybe that can work.
And like at the same time, Rodgers' numbers weren't that bad last year. I mean, I think
they weren't.
It's just so easily overlooked just because of who he is and the attention he brings upon himself. But you're also forgetting the fact that, like Kirk Cousins, he was fresh off an Achilles injury. Like, he's gone through a whole year of that, a whole off season healthy. Who knows? Like we could see another year of similar or maybe even a little better production than we had from him this year. So obviously that's probably the story. Not probably. That's the storyline of the offseason, what happens with him. But I think whether he's there or not, Aaron Glenn, slam dunk.
Bring Darnold back. All right, moving on to another hire, Pat. Your Raiders made their head coaching hire. 73-year-old Pete Carroll coming in to bring some youthful exuberance, and I'm not being funny about that. He's actually got that kind of energy to him to Las Vegas.
He looks like 53. Like, that man looks phenomenal. And looks
also
like
looks like Ellen
DeGeneres.
DeGeneres. Yes.
Yep. Yeah,
okay.
I say that every time. Yep.
How are you feeling about the hire, Pat? I know you tweeted that you wanted an actual like young guy, like a Liam Coen type if it was possible.
Yes.
But knowing that you've got Pete Carroll now, what are you expecting and how are you feeling about it?
I'm not like sitting here like, yes, they got Pete Carroll. I am incredibly content just because, yes, I wanted an offensive mind, but the problem is like, they have no fucking idea who their quarterback is going to be this year. Like, if they had a guy already said like, hey,
sure?
Broncos country, let's ride.
Are you sure they don't know who their quarterback's going to be?
Broncos country, let's ride.
Careful,
sure?
It's spicy. But Pete Carroll is not spicy. But
Broncos country, let's ride.
Shut the fuck.
Duval.
But fuck. Okay. But I think Mark Davis looked in the mirror and did some reflecting and realized that his flaw, the last, whatever, has been not playing it safe. Going and getting a guy like John Gruden, who hadn't had success in the league in almost 2 decades, is more of the flashy move. And for that to fail catastrophically. And then to go against keeping Rich Bisaccia, I love you, Uncle Rich, in favor of Josh fucking McDaniels, who might be like the worst head coach ever.
Yep.
And for that to be as disastrous as it was, to then kind of make this really lame duck hire of Antonio Pierce, who I feel for. But, like, Pete Carroll is, out of everyone, was the most, like, stable decision they could have made. We've seen him have success, major success in Seattle, at USC as well, where he is still a professor, and he's still going to teach his class. Can you fucking imagine? Being like, oh yeah, Pete, I got to go to Pete Carroll's leadership class in a second. But
I would love that. God.
I think while there is so much uncertainty at quarterback, whether they find someone in this year's class or they kind of have to ride it out again, maybe with a guy like
Broncos country, let's ride.
I foresaw that one. Pete Carroll will at least provide the leadership and the stability that this team needs in order to kind of continue to make that transition into the new era of the Raiders under whoever that quarterback of the future is going to be. And also the fact that it's clear that the Raiders like to run the football. And, he's obviously not an offensive coach, but those Seattle teams, man, they loved running the football. Mm-hmm. We'll see who he brings in. It is not very good that his last
is Chris Carson available?
His last 2 hirings for coordinators were Brian Schottenheimer and Shane Waldron, Tufts alum. So, maybe pick somebody new. Maybe, go and get somebody else you've worked with there. But that'll obviously be interesting. But even if it is some kind of unknown, I just feel like he's just not going to put up with the shit. I don't see him kind of being a lame duck being fired in 2 years the way I might have with some of these other guys because he's Pete Carroll. Again, I think ideally you go with the Liam Coen, the Joe Brady, the Todd Monken, the Big Splash. But if you don't, which they didn't do, Pete Carroll was the best option they could have gone for here.
Yeah, I like the hire as well. I'm excited to see Pete Carroll back in the league. This AFC
Stop bringing
West.
up Hugh Jackson in the chat, Alex.
These AFC
What are you going to Lane
coaches,
Kiffin next?
These AFC West coaches are nuts. Harbaugh, Reed, Peyton, Carroll. I mean, also, Pete Carroll just hates Harbaugh, I'm pretty sure, because he's just followed him and tortured him everywhere he's been.
Even back to those
for
those
2
Pac-12
decades.
days.
USC
Probably even
and
the Pac-10 back then, yeah.
USC and Stanford back then, and then the Niners and the Seahawks in the NFL, and now he's following him over to torture him with the Chargers. Just a funny development, but it's always good to see Pete Carroll back in the league, and yeah, I think it's a better hire than some others they could have made for sure. So I'm excited to see him back in the league. No coordinators hired yet. Does seem like he's trying to retain Patrick Graham as defensive coordinator, which makes sense considering how hot of a candidate he is elsewhere.
Where was he? Was he not Seattle's? Or no, I think he interviewed there at one point.
Patrick Graham? Yeah, I'm not sure. But
he is the top candidate to be Jaguar. Oh, they interviewed him for the Jaguars. Oh, that's interesting. Where they kind of used him. No, he was never in Seattle. Kind of used him as a bit of a pawn, and now he's the favorite to be their DC. Stay in Vegas, buddy.
Hey,
they don't have strip clubs in. Well, I imagine the strip clubs in Jacksonville are absolutely diabolical. I don't even think James Harden would go into those things.
The strip
clubs Vegas.
The strip clubs in
Duval.
I don't even know if trade request Harden would go into one of those, to be completely honest. So
yeah,
Patrick, stay in Vegas. Vegas is great. I'm going to Vegas.
And then last but not least, the last head coach opening that has not been filled yet, the only one that hasn't been filled yet, the New Orleans Saints. Down to effectively 4 candidates here: Kellen Moore, Mike Kafka, Anthony Weaver, and Mike McCarthy still hanging around. Cliff Kingsbury said today that he will not pursue this job and will instead stay on as the offensive coordinator in Washington, which good for him, good for them. I think smart all around. Don't go to this flaming sort of dumpster fire in New Orleans if you've got a pretty cushy job right now, which he does, coaching Jaden Daniels on the offensive side of the ball there. The Saints did travel to Philly Monday to interview Kellen Moore. Dan Graziano even going as far as calling him a strong favorite for the job. And I think at this point it's hard to not think that's the case because the position is unfilled. And he is the only one of those candidates that physically can't be hired yet.
It was like when Kyle Shanahan got hired by these 49ers after the 8-3 Super Bowl. Everybody knew it was him, but they were just kind of and that just kind of feels like what's happening now. So it seems like it's going to be Kellen Moore. And I think it's a great hire. We saw him be a really popular candidate here, which is crazy how he reinvented himself from getting run out of Los Angeles to now leading a team to a Super Bowl, or helping lead a team to a Super Bowl, possibly winning. And then, poor Jalen Hurts, another offensive coordinator.
Man, yeah, that guy just cannot catch a break. I think it's going to be Kellen Moore in New Orleans as well. I think that's a smart hire for them, all things considered. They weren't exactly the most attractive job, obviously. There was a reason that they weren't super seriously pursued by a Ben Johnson, who just had his pick of wherever he wanted to go, basically. And why I don't know if the Saints didn't pick Aaron Glenn or if Aaron Glenn didn't pick the Saints, but either way, I know they at least interviewed him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he actually even chose the Jets over the Saints with how badly things are being kind of run into the ground there. Their cap situation, their owner situation is not great. Maybe it is even worth picking Woody Johnson over it. So I think this is kind of the best of the options left would be Kellen Moore. And just to touch on some other offensive coordinator news here, Pat, you mentioned that Jalen Hurts will have a new OC if Kellen Moore were to leave. Well, Maybe that could be Bobby Slowick, because Bobby Slowick got fired by the Houston Texans. Again, another very late in the game firing.
Man.
Honestly, we could have talked about this way earlier in the show, just given the impact of it. But this was a surprising move. Bobby Slowick was considered, like we said earlier, a head coach candidate this time last year because of just how good how well he performed with the Texans offense and a rookie CJ Stroud. But this past year was just pretty awful for the Texans offense. And now he finds himself out of a job. And we find ourselves wondering who is going to revive this offense under CJ Stroud and get the most out of it. I've seen rumblings about Chip Kelly. I think that would be a really fun option, tracing back to his Ohio State days. But
the first guy they interviewed, you remember fucking Thad Lewis?
Oh my God, did they interview Thad Lewis?
Yeah, like the Duke quarterback. They interviewed him.
Yeah.
He's been with the Bucs for a few years, and obviously, like with Dave Canales, with Liam Coen, he's worked with some really good offensive coordinators. So, like, the next natural step would be for him to, move up to offensive coordinator. Obviously, play the quarterback position. Obviously, yeah, I could see them kind of going for Chip Kelly, man. Fuck. I was thinking about him. I was surprised that I hadn't heard his name yet this cycle. But I think the big takeaway here from Slowick is kind of what you said with Liam Coen, where it's like, you can't fall back on anything. Like, Ben Johnson didn't get lucky, but, like, it could have happened to Ben Johnson, where he's done it a couple times now, where he's gone back and still done well enough to where he had his pick of where to go. Bobby Slowick, he wasn't necessarily turning down jobs last year, but he went from a guy that got interviewed by multiple teams to jobless.
Yeah.
Jobless.
Yeah, I think, like, I don't think this is surprising as somebody that's followed what the Texans were doing this year. It was surprising that the Texans did what they did this year, which was perform so terribly and lacklusterly on offense after what we saw last year. He got a lot of shit for not adapting to their offensive line weaknesses, just kind of stubbornly sticking with the same old stuff and not really being innovative. And for a guy that was, thought of as, I don't know if innovative was the word always attached to him, but he was thought of as a really good offensive mind, and maybe got exposed a little bit here and, fired ultimately. But who knows, Pat? Maybe he ends up in Philly if Kellen Moore gets out of the job. We'll see who the Eagles bring in if that were to be the case. Sticking with the offensive coordinator updates, the Seahawks have hired Clint Kubiak as their OC, which is good news for their run game and their offense in general. I think I'm excited for, Kenneth Walker in fantasy next year. Charbonnet as well. They're both kind of proving themselves as decent fantasy options as running backs. But this is a guy that I don't think will... Stop. Yeah, probably. This is a guy that I don't think will abandon the run game as much as Ryan Grubb did this past season. That was his big criticism, so hopefully bring a little bit more consistent balance to this offense.
And to see how well Jackson Smith and Jigba played, and obviously DK Metcalf is still DK Metcalf, if he can keep a solid level of play out of Geno Smith, at least for fantasy-wise, this could be another a plentiful offense with a good amount of options here.
100%. Fun fact, Pat, the Broncos kind of got poached this coaching cycle a lot.
Even the GM cycle as well.
Yeah, I was grouping that in. So the Bears hired Declan Doyle as their offensive coordinator under new coach Ben Johnson. Declan Doyle was the tight end coach for the Broncos this past year. And then the Lions have hired John Morton as their offensive coordinator to replace Ben Johnson. He was the pass game coordinator for the Broncos last year. And then, as we mentioned before, Darren Muji got hired as the GM for the Jets. He was the assistant GM for the Broncos. So the Broncos, after, obviously this was a good year for them, they got rated like they made a conference title game. Like, it was crazy. I made the joke, like, is this just what happens when you make Bo Nix look good? You get a bunch of teams being like, we got to get to the bottom of who made that possible because somebody did. We're going to take everybody and figure it out later. Some new offensive coordinators in those spots. I should say the Lions one I think is more interesting than the Bears one, because the Bears one we kind of know Ben Johnson's going to be running the ship there. It's just going to be a matter of Declan Doyle handling some of the other responsibilities there, but he won't be the play caller or anything like that. This will be Ben Johnson's offense that Declan Doyle just kind of manages. The Lions, however, though, I think it'll be interesting to see how John Morton fares there, because he should have a decent amount of say, you would think, with Ben Johnson out of the picture now. So that'll be a fun one to watch. I mean, pass game coordinator for the Broncos, Pat, like I joked about it, but like to get a guy like Bo Nix and to get the numbers out of him that you did and to be a part of that, I think that's got to be something you are impressed by.
Without like a super strong cast of characters as well. It was just Cortland Sutton in the island of misfit toys.
I mean, Marvin Mims went crazy at the end of the year. But yeah, that was a masterclass in taking a quarterback who, you know, was really criticized for his limitations coming into the league and getting the absolute most out of him. You know, not to give their pass game coordinator all the credit for that, but like to be a part in that, that's certainly something to note. And then, as we mentioned before, the Buccaneers interviewing Nick Caley, tight end coach and pass game coordinator for the Rams, for their OC job. If they get him, I'm just going to say it's probably business as usual for the Bucs offense next year, and that they're not going to feel that much of a fall off if Liam Coen is gone, with Liam Coen leaving. Pat, with all this news, what do we think is the best hire for fantasy purposes, for real life purposes that we've seen so far? What are we most
real
excited
life
about?
Purposes? It's Aaron Glenn, just because of how dysfunctional something going on. Geez, a lot of commotion going on back there.
There's just some dishes being shuffled.
You know what happens. But we talk about how dysfunctional that organization has been, and this is a guy who's been around football for a long time, was certainly a long overdue for a head coaching position, and especially with the cast of characters, like actual characters that they have there, and Aaron Rodgers, Woody Johnson, his 16-year-old sons. Like, I think Aaron Glenn is a guy to bring stability, and again, in a league where things are moving drastically offensive, I think this is a case where bringing in a defensive coach can still work, and if he brings in Tanner Engstrad, then that, you know, for fantasy purposes, we could be talking even better. But at least from an organizational standpoint, I think it's Aaron Glenn.
I think that's fair. I think trying to see.
Fantasy, at least.
Fantasy wise, I think my favorite hire still has to be Ben Johnson, just overall.
Yeah.
I think he just adds. We don't even know what the Bears' weapons are going to be, but I have a trust in him that he's going to get the best out of a lot of different weapons there, which is going to be better than this past season, which was getting literally no consistent production from anybody. DeAndre Swift had like a month, DJ Moore had like a month, and then another month, but nobody was ever consistently reliable. And I think Caleb Williams, especially, if you could get the most out of him, he can become a real fantasy weapon as well.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing in terms of him, because the other guy I'm thinking here is Liam Coen for fantasy purposes. And I think the big difference here is, like I said earlier, like a lot of the pieces in Jacksonville are already there. Like at least Ben Johnson, if he wants to kind of employ the rushing attack he had in Detroit, I don't think DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson are going to be the guys to do that. You probably need to bring somebody else in to that equation. But at the same time, I think Caleb Williams' ceiling is way higher than Trevor Lawrence, if we're looking at strictly from the QB position. So I will go Johnson. I'll go Johnson with you from the fantasy, but I think Liam Coen is also going to, reap great reward for a lot of Jags.
The best real-life hire, obviously, was Mike Vrabel, though, so just to get that out of the way.
I forgot about him. Jesus, that feels like 3 years ago.
In other news, just to wrap this show up, Drake May got named to the Pro Bowl, and I mean, talk about well-deserved, Pat. I don't know how he got left off the roster to begin with. I mean, leaving the best quarterback in the AFC off the Pro Bowl roster was just criminal, so I'm glad he got named, along with the AFC's second-best quarterback, Russell Wilson.
Play the bit.
Broncos country, let's ride.
Thank you.
God, the Pro Bowl's a joke. It's cool that Drake May gets to call himself a Pro Bowler, but like so did Tyler Huntley. So
I was gonna say we need Snoop back there. Come on, man. He played Gardner pretty bad for a few games. Let's get him in there.
All right, that does it for the show today, folks. We will be back here next week, but I mean, obviously, all that's happening between now and then is the Pro Bowl, and then whatever news developments.
We got to figure out some stupid stuff to do by then.
I know. We will be bringing back the draft segments and such very soon, I'm sure. So for anybody out there listening that has any suggestions, feel free to DM us, comment on this video, any sort of drafts that you want to see us do, any fun segments, because I don't think it's going to be, insult us, just roast us. I don't think it's going to be that hard to like fill shows for the next few weeks because there's going to be a lot of news, but there's not going to be any games to talk about.
Yeah,
so we gotta.
I was thinking about it earlier. We've made it work too. This will be the third off season we're going into now, and we've managed to make it work without it getting too thin. So I'm sure we'll be fine.
It always works, but we also want to hear your suggestions. So
even until fantasy season picks up, stick with us. We're going to have some fun
100%.
stuff.
100%. All right, folks. For Pat Gustafson, I am Brandon Carney. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys next week.
Duval. Bye-bye.
Duval.
I actually
All
put
right,
it
folks.
close.
And for those of you sticking around here, we will stick around here for a few
around.
minutes to answer some of your questions. We got the starred messages, our donation messages, our super chats that we'll go over first. 10 euros, I think, from Bucko here, and the question kind of
Bucko.
confirms that. He says, any tips on fantasy football for a new Englishman as I'm joining my American Unimates league next season who have played it for years? Got into the NFL thanks to you two, so any help would be valued.
Bucky.
Well, first of
Bucko,
all,
whoops.
that's fucking awesome.
That's touching. Like, I'm
glad we
genuinely
can
a
help you
little
do
touched.
that. Now, as far as fantasy football tips, I would say if you are new to it, don't expect to be dominant and don't get bogged down by all the nuances of fantasy football just yet. Understand the basics of it first and go from there. So the basics when you are joining a fantasy football league for the first time, newbies love to try to draft quarterbacks a little too high. I would say don't do that, especially this upcoming year, Pat. I mean, honestly, maybe this advice is getting outdated because we're going to start to see guys like Lamar and Josh Allen get drafted, I think, closer to the
Hurts
first
as well,
round.
too, yeah.
And Jalen Hurts, and that might not be a bad move. But look,
Jaden Daniels.
the general fantasy consensus is to wait on quarterback because it is only one position you have to fill on your roster versus running backs and receivers, which you have to fill either 2 or 3 of, depending on your settings. So understand just positional values, and beyond that, my biggest advice is to just stay informed on the latest news of what's going on in the NFL using Twitter or X or whatever the fuck.
I was about to say, like, as much garbage as there is out there in terms of fantasy analysis, including myself, like, there's a lot of good stuff. Like, there have been guys who have been doing this for way too long, considerably, and I think there's even some stuff out there, like, on, like, newbie guides to fantasy football. Just take in as much as you can, get as many people's different opinions as possible, and then craft your own out of that.
Yep.
And listen to the Brand Coverage podcast.
Honestly, I will say for newbies, I think we are a pretty good resource because we try to touch on basically every piece of news that happens throughout the offseason. We'll give you some of our favorite players and all that, and hopefully some sleepers that maybe even your league mates aren't really in tune to. But yeah, just focus on the basics. If you search just new stuff for new fantasy football players, there are a lot of great resources out there, so can't recommend that enough. Lucian with $5 said there was a Who Wins the Super Bowl poll at my college today. I added and voted for the meteor option and the rest to be saved. Yeah, I think giant meteor, aka large space rock, is what kind of a lot of people are rooting for this year with this fucking matchup. Chaos in Order with $4.99 said, I'm a Chiefs fan, but I did not want a rematch against the Eagles either. I wanted to play Washington.
As you saw last week, for good reason, you wanted to play Washington.
Yeah, I'm sure you wanted to play the rookie quarterback with the terrible defense.
Exactly. As fun as it would have been to see Jaden Daniels get to the Super Bowl, I think everyone wanted the Eagles to get there, and just in case it was the Chiefs, because they simply have a much better shot at taking them down. I think the Commanders would have made for a hard to watch. At least this Super Bowl will probably be fun to watch. That might have been hard to watch.
Taylor with $2 said Eagles need to get Eli Manning out of retirement.
I got a lot of comments about your Eli Manning slander last week, and by that I mean 2. So,
Fuck Eli Manning. He's not a real Hall of Famer. He's a fraud who rode the back of a good defense and made 2 good throws in his entire fucking life. Fuck that guy. Lucian with another $5 said Schottenheimer was the passing game coordinator in Jacksonville under Urban Meyer. Yikes.
Based.
Also...
Duval.
And lastly, we had the man, the myth, the aggro. He just donated $1 with no message.
Thank you.
So appreciate you, man. Thank you very, very much. All right, let me get these messages out of the way, and then we'll answer some questions from the general chat as well before we go offline. So if you have any questions, we would love to address them. Let's see.
They drafted the wrong... wait, did the Raiders draft the wrong Byron Young by mistake? No, I didn't see that. Oh yeah, because there are 2 of them.
I do remember hearing that.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that there were 2 of them. That's funny.
I did vaguely hear about that. Let's see. Lily says, love y'all's take on the Chiefs. The only sore spot as a fan is the discredit the team gets because of all the ref conspiracies. Honestly, if we win, I'm taking a break from all socials. Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally fair. Look, there's definitely some questionable calls that go in the Chiefs' favor. I don't think it's from a source of rigging. I don't think it's from a source of anything other than the refs are kind of stupid. And They are also conditioned to give Mahomes a certain level of treatment. I think it's mostly centered around Mahomes more than anything when you see
that's how it is. You saw a lot with Brady and
it happened with Brady
and
too,
Rodgers and stuff. Like, these good quarterbacks, they garner the respect of the officials, and the officials are kind of gonna even see it in other sports too, and like in baseball, where they say to Barry Bonds, like, oh, if he didn't swing, it must have been out of the zone. So but yeah, it's frustrating, obviously, with how coincidental it is that it's all for the Chiefs. But again, they're still a really good team.
It is what it is. You will never convince me or Pat that the NFL is rigged. There's too much money at stake. There's too many other things that could and would have happened over the years if they were just trying to juice every dollar out of every possible thing, which they do in some respects, but not in rigging game results. Eaton? I'm not sure what this name is. It looks like Ethan, but it's not. Sorry if I mispronounced it. But had a good question. He said, why do you think the Jets fired a defensive mind, Robert Saleh, and then hired a different defensive mind? They need an offensive mind. The offense is more of a problem than the defense.
I think Aaron Glenn will it's going to matter of who he brings in as the offensive mind here. That's not fucking Nathaniel Hackett. Again, because if Aaron Glenn can be the leader that brings the stability, even the head guy not being, we've seen it with the defensive coaches that remain in the league. They've made it work. They've made it work because they bring in good coordinators. And if he does bring Tanner Engstrad and he's the right guy, then that's the right guy.
Yeah, I think it's not always as black and white as, they went defensive and now they're going defensive again, so it's a mistake. You got to remember these are different people. Not all defensive coordinators are just pulled out of the same bucket and they're all going to have the same effect on a team. It's a matter of how he's going to run this team, how he's going to lead it, how he's going to delegate. There are defensive coaches that have been able to succeed in the league. Now, granted, it is true it's getting fewer and farther between as offense takes over, but I think if you get the right offensive coordinator, it doesn't really matter that you're a defensive head coach. Look at what the Commanders just did with Dan Quinn as a head coach. A hire that I completely shit on when it happened for similar reasons to this, and it kind of taught me not to do that automatically. If you get the right guy as far as a leader and he brings in the right guys in terms of fixing the offense, you don't necessarily need an offensive mind to be your head coach. Alex says, if the Patriots sign T. Higgins, can I bequeath my Bengals T jersey to Bran? Absolutely. I'll send you my address.
Bequeath is an excellent word in the English language, by the way.
Agree. Kyle says, who are you rooting for in the Super Bowl with his Eagles profile picture? It is the Eagles. Very much so.
Yes.
Yes.
Nope.
If you are a neutral fan and you are rooting for a Chiefs three-peat, I want you jailed. I have no beef with the Eagles. I want your toenails ripped off one by one, and I want hot chili peppers shoved in your rectum. Okay.
That's just Tuesday. Oh shit! I gotta get to that after this.
Let's see.
Hey, hang on. I saw a NASCAR comment earlier. It went away. Oh, perfect. Ryan commented again for the NASCAR race, the Clash this week. Bowman Gray. Someone's gonna literally die. Joey Logano wins all these funny races, so I'm gonna pick Joey Logano.
Joey Logano, Connecticut's finest, baby.
3-time champion, fraud.
Let's see. We'll take two more questions. So get your hot questions in here, and we will pick the best ones that we find.
The hot and steamy questions.
So here's a funny one. Where is Thomas Brown going? Thomas Brown got hired. Where did Thomas Brown get? I think the Patriots hired Thomas Brown. I'm pretty sure. He is our passing game coordinator / tight ends coach. Yeah. So there's your answer to that question.
It's a great hire.
He is a Patriot, which
could have been an OC. Yeah, great hire.
I'm cool with Thomas Brown being that, considering the higher profile jobs he's had lately.
And then when McDaniels flames out, they can promote him to OC.
No. What is your score prediction for Eagles Chiefs, Pat?
Eagles, the Chiefs will probably win by 1, so we can go for the off myself option. I'll go Eagles. I'll be the boring. I'll make it wild. Eagles 28, Chiefs 25. How? I don't fucking know. Don't ask.
I'm going to go Eagles 27, Chiefs 25
Because everyone goes 27-24, so I just moved it a point. I think
that's totally fair. Gino with $5 said, I think you're just biased as a Patriot / Tom Brady fan. I hate Tom Brady enough to root for the Chiefs. Now that's interesting.
I fucking hate Tom Brady, and that could never get me to do that.
That's interesting though, because Brady hate was only born out of the Patriots being dominant. So why are you by default just rooting for a different dominance to overtake?
So somebody could have a better image than Tom Brady. Someone could go down in history as a better quarterback than Tom Brady, maybe? I personally don't care. I softened on Brady a lot towards the end. Same way I've softened with LeBron, where it's like, yeah, I fucking hate the Patriots, and I hated the Patriots, and the Giants winning those Super Bowls was the best things that's ever happened in my life. But like you gotta respect that greatness, and it's kind of the same way here, like even with Mahomes. So like, yeah, if you want to see somebody surpass that, I get it, but still, no.
Let's see. Yatster said, why do you think the Seahawks didn't draft a quarterback last year, and do you think they will this year? I mean, Geno's not getting any younger. Sure. I mean, I don't think they'll spend a high pick on one.
No,
I mean,
middle round kind of guy.
Granted, we've seen, we've been surprised before. The Falcons taking Michael Penix after signing
Turns out
Kirk
a good
Cousins.
decision.
So that's about the right age. But granted, Geno didn't just tear his Achilles. So I think they could take one. It would probably be a later pick just because Geno's not going any. I mean, what is Geno? Geno's probably 33. He's 34. He'll turn 35 this season. So yeah, I mean, it might be the right time to draft somebody and try to develop him. But Geno, I think the way he plays has another year or two left in him. Geno hates Brady because he beat my Rams. Okay, fair enough. All right, that'll do it, guys. That is very logical. That will do it for our actual brand coverage post-show today and the overall show. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back next week with whatever segments we cook up for you or you cook up for us. For Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Duval.